Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So, work has begun on the Mark II's turbo header. And I made a little bit of off-camera progress, nothing too crazy, but we'll go over locating everything on the front side. I just wanted to get this done by myself off camera, so that way I knew that things would fit and we're working with a good foundation. So what we have right now, we have our secondary collector, we have our 2.5 inch secondary, we have our primary collector in the first primary, which is number 5, going down to this port on the collector. So everything that is sitting right here fits, although I did pull out this oil pressure sensor or switch or whatever it is, as in looking at this, there was just no way that that the header was going to fit around it, so I'll move it, relocate it, and all will be well. So at this point in time, now that I know that all of this fits, I'm going to go ahead and weld up the secondary section as well as the first primary, and then get everything tacked back in place. So that way everything's kind of locked down and I can continue moving forward from there. Well, the first section of the Mark II's new turbo header is all welded up. And while this is out of the order of operations that I normally employ in building these, it was a necessity for this one. So I put the turbo in just to kind of get an idea of the space I'm allotted and everything else. And it's certainly going to be tight around the front side of the header here, but I think I should be able to make it work. But backside wise, everything is welded up and it's at least good enough to hold the turbo up for the time being. But we have number 5 that comes down into here, and 4 will go to this port, 6 will go to this port right here, and everything will be cool. Front side, like I said, is going to be a little bit more of a challenge between the turbo and the tight confines. If you guys can see, get a better hold on the camera, but tight confines down in here to the engine mount bracket. This side will be a challenge, but it shouldn't be anything that's impossible, although I may have to dive into my bag of tricks to make this work. Now with the turbo out of the way, we can see a little bit more clearly what I've done and what we're working with now. So this side, like I said, it came out pretty nicely. I'm happy with it. Everything's welded up. And I did my trick with silicone bronze up on the head flange. And this silicone bronze weld actually came out pretty nicely. I'm happy with it. But so far, the progress is going well. And although it's about time for me to get out of here today, tomorrow I can come in and work on the remainder of this rear section and then start on the challenging front side of this turbo header. Today I've decided to begin work on the front secondary section and locating the front primary collector. So I have all of my impediments in place right here between the turbo and down here the oil filter relocation setup. And these fittings will end up changing on the relocation, but at least it's in here right now, so that way I can work around it and build around it. So in looking at this, and I have my piece of 2.5-inch tubing right here. If I hold this in here, kind of, like so, if you guys can see, and this is going to be kind of tight and difficult to look at, but where this is sitting, I'm hitting the engine mount bracket right now, but it appears as though if I take some length out of one of the legs of this tube, I will clear that bracket and be able to run the primary collector up a little bit more forward and be able to make all of this fit that way. So some of this will end up being off camera, as there really isn't a great way to see a lot of it, but you can at least get in the ballpark and get some of this started up and get the front section on its way to being finalized. The front secondary for the Mark II's turbo header is mostly welded and tacked to the secondary collector, ready to have primaries built to it. So this was a little bit tricky, but I made it work, and I wound up changing these fittings out for angled ones, so don't pay attention to the clearance too much here, although there is certainly clearance between this fitting and the secondary. So I had to snake it around this engine mount bracket while leaving enough clearance to be able to get primaries up to the ports on the head. And it looks pretty cool, I think, or maybe a little bit goofy, or maybe somewhere in between the two. But that is about the best that I'm able to do with the materials that I have on hand, and frankly the materials that I'm able to get. So I'm pretty happy with it. And now, similar to what I did on the backside, I'll build one of the primaries, get it all fabbed and welded, and this whole front secondary section welded together. And then we will just have 4 more primaries to build at that point in time, and all will be well. Both the front and the rear sections of the Mark II's new turbo header are now locked in place. So with the front section, everything here is welded up, and now both the front and the rear are in their final locations, and I'm ready to connect the dots with the remaining 4 primaries. So it looks a little bit funky, but that's just what was necessary to get everything around the oil filter location, or relocation rather, the engine mount bracket and all of that. But everything came out very nicely. I'm happy with it. And again, the silicone bronze trick up on the head flange, and this thing is looking very nice. Another thing to note is kind of the beauty of back purging. If you guys can see down in there, the front side full penetration, rear side full penetration, and it's probably a little bit difficult to see in there, but you can see there are the penetration is on the inside of the tubes, and I'm pretty confident that this thing is going to stay together for the long term, at least with the welds that way. So tomorrow I will come in and go ahead and start working on the remaining primaries and see how far I get at that point. But this thing is coming together very nicely, and I'm very excited to finally get this all wrapped up and have a new header on the Mark II and move on to the rest of the fabrication work. I have the manifold and the turbo pulled out of the Mark II. As for the next primary, I need to build it on the bench like this. So I'm going to work on number 3 right now, and if I can slide this piece of tubing in here, let's see. And with the piece of tubing slid in here, you can see, if I can get my fingers out of the way, the tight confines that I'm dealing with. So I've tested this already, and I can get around the front side, or the side of the compressor housing right here. And then there will be some interesting jogging and moving around to get everything to fit. But whenever you are building stuff like this that is tight confines, it will benefit you in the long run to not build something and hope that it fits, but to actually get set up with as many of the impediments that you're working around as possible and build things on the bench this way. So it's a little bit awkward to have the turbo and the manifold up here, and you'll be sitting, or at least I'm sitting with my fingers crossed that this vise holds onto this secondary. But this is what is required to do this once, and hopefully do it right once. So without me droning on anymore, let's go ahead and start fitting up primary 3. Well, a few days of work in the books, in the Mark II has a brand new turbo header. So this is the end result of it, and I am very happy with the finished product. So the way that this kind of lays out, the turbo sits center, hides a lot of the secondaries, but you can see a lot of the primaries, and it's kind of like a ram horn type deal almost. But I'm very happy that you can see a lot of the tube work from the top side here. So the manifold, or the turbo header rather, clears everything, and obviously I need to get all the rest of the fasteners, and the turbo's ugly right now. But we have clearance to all crucial components, namely the oil filter relocation stuff down in there. There's clearance to this reference line right here, although I probably will end up remaking this line out of something else, or at least covering it with some sort of thermal barrier. But this thing came out sweet, and it's cool to see this with the turbo back on it, and I couldn't be happier right now. So now that the header is completed, the next order of business will be the exhaust, and I'll be working with Matt yet again, as I have something pretty special planned for the exhaust for this thing, and it'll be an exhaust unlike anything that, to my knowledge, has ever been on a Mark II Supra to date. So this header places the turbo in the location that it was before, which is the factory location for a 7M GTE, as the manifold that was on this car is a modified 7M GTE factory cast exhaust manifold. But I couldn't leave well enough alone, and due to what I do for a living, what I've spent my adult life doing, I wanted to build something unique for it, and something that was a bit better than just a run-of-the-mill cast manifold. So all of the welds came out nicely. I love the look of the silicon bronze on the head flange. Of course, I put a BPA logo in a visible location, and this thing I think looks really cool. And the same with any header build. I can't wait to hear what it sounds like, but we are still a ways away from being able to hear that. Now the turbo is just a factory CT26 Mark III Supra turbo, and it will be sent out to be rebuilt and more than likely upgraded, as if I send it out to be rebuilt, why not put a billet wheel in it at that point in time? And this turbo with the engine before that was consuming coolant, or coolant entering the combustion chamber, and the oiling system, from what I could tell when I drained the oil out of this, I'm sure the bearings are about shot, or at least pretty gummed up from all the coolant going through them. So it's about time to clean the turbo up, get it all squared away and everything, and get it ready to go back into service. So the turbo that is on the Mark II, it's a pretty neat story with it, and I guess let's sit down on the couch and do a quick story time. So my dad and I built this car initially when I was I think we started when I was 12 or 13 years old, something like that. And always had the intent to do a turbo system, or to install a turbo system on it. And I dealt with a friend of mine named Aaron, and he ran a company that was called Rabid Chimp Performance. So got to be friends with Aaron over the years, and finally got to the point where we were ordering the turbo system. And I think we were able to save some money on it by not getting a turbo with it, or he required you to source your own turbo. In any case, we didn't have a turbo for it, and I would sit on eBay or eBay Motors at that point in time and just browse through all the different CT26 turbos that were on there. And I stumbled across one that looked much cleaner and much nicer than the rest of them. So it was all bright shiny silver with red Toyota CT26 lettering on the compressor cover, and I fell in love with this thing. And I don't believe that I talked to my dad about it, or if I did, it was just in passing. And we were getting towards my birthday and towards Christmas, and just sat there and kept drooling over this turbo. And whichever one of those came up, being my birthday or Christmas, there was a box there, and it looked like just some random box that had been shipped from not a company or anything like that. And I opened it up, and it was that bright, shiny silver with red lettering CT26 turbo. So without really many words being exchanged, that turbo showed up, and that is the turbo that is on the car at this point in time. So that turbo, with it having kind of that special sentimental story behind it, is the turbo that will be on this car for as long as it is around. I can't get rid of it just due to that story and due to the memory of my dad that's associated with it. And frankly, with this car, not trying to make 1,000 wheel or anything like that, a turbo will serve its purpose perfectly and will do exactly what I want it to on this car. So this header build was made much easier by my friends at Stainless Bros. And Stainless Bros, if you guys are not aware, is the stainless sister company to Tycon Industries. And both of those companies, they offer incredible materials and are essentially at the forefront or the tip of the spear as far as materials are concerned for fabrication projects at this point in time. Now, why I talk about Stainless Bros as much as I do and talk about them as highly as I do is because of the material quality. And excuse me for not wearing gloves right now. Typically I would if I was going to put this piece into service, but we can just use it as an example right now and talk about the quality of the materials. So you can see the exterior surface finish. It's a beautiful brushed finish, and that finish continues onto the inside of the tube there as well. And don't mind kind of the scratches around where my ring finger is right there. That is from deburring. But when you have clean, beautiful materials like this, it makes the job much easier when you are going to build parts. And it isn't just limited to smaller diameter stuff. This is one of the 2.5-inch leftover sections. You can see the beautiful internal surface finish, beautiful external. You can see they actually laser etch their Stainless Bros logo in 321 to signify that this is 321 stainless. And guys, the higher quality materials that you are working with, the more time that you save in the process of building parts like this, and the easier they are to work with, the better the end result will be. Now, if I would have used another type of tube that had kind of a mill finish on it, I would have spent so much time sitting on the bench grinder right here and polishing things up and getting them prettied up and everything like that. And this build would have taken much longer. But due to the fact that I could open a bag and pull a piece of material out and get right to work, saves a ton of time, a ton of effort, and a ton of money and consumables and everything else. So if you have a header build or an exhaust build or anything like that, please consider Stainless Bros and or Tycon for it, as they will save you a bunch of time and frankly a bunch of money in the process as well. And you'll end up with a superior end product as opposed to if you would have used lesser materials or materials that require more effort to pretty up before you actually start working with them and put them into service. With all of that being said, and with another project completed, another project in the books, I think that will be about the end of this one. So thank you guys as always for tuning in, for coming on all these different journeys with me, whether it be my fastest header build to date is this one from flange to completed header was right about a week's time, and that is a bit abnormal. I was hustling quite a bit for this, but it's done now, and I'm happy with it. But whether it be this, whether it be the Mark IV, whether it be any of the other projects that go on around here, I thank you all very much for taking time out of your days to come along on all these different adventures with me. I hope that you guys are learning some things and having fun along the way, because I know that I am. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all very much. But with all of that being said, that will be about the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way. and I will see you all in the next episode.